we're meeting here today is just to go through the outcome of our 2017 strategic planning session with the board. And what we're going to do is we're going to explain some of the principles that have literally come about as a result of how we want to look or how we want to frame our strategy. So it's not about the things that we're going to do, it's just framing up what we're already doing in a way that we can understand some of the principles and theories behind what we're trying to accomplish as Innovation Credit Union. So we'll walk you through kind of some different concepts. Those concepts are the Ministry of Finance. When we become a federal credit union, they have some core policy objectives. And those core policy objectives we want to align with as we become a federal credit union. We want to make sure that we are reinforcing and complying with what the Ministry of Finance at the federal government is looking at in terms of aligning our strategy to their policy objectives. We're going to talk about responsible banking as a concept, and we're also going to be talking about disruptive innovation, and we're going to be talking about beyond disruptive innovation, how might that come about when we look at principles, and it's called GAFA, and I'll explain that later. But just to give you a framework of understanding of what we're trying to accomplish when we go federal and become a federal credit union, I'll get Sheldon here to just kind of walk you through what the Ministry of Finance is looking for and how we're trying to align ourselves to those objectives. Sheldon?
Thanks, Dean. So as Dean mentioned, one of the key stakeholders that we have in place currently and will become more prominent as we move forward is the federal government of Canada. And so one of the things I wanted to walk through is just an upcoming review of by the federal government around the financial sector policy that impacts financial institutions across the country. And so if we go to the next slide, there's a consultation paper that was published back in 2016 in which the federal finance ministry is asking for input around this policy review. And so we're just going to walk through a couple of things and key observations directly taken from that paper itself. So on the next slide, it's important to know really what is the role of the Department of Finance as far as how they interact with financial institutions in the financial industry overall. So really, if you look at the quote that was provided here, what the Department of Finance is looking for is they really want confidence in a strong and well-functioning financial sector when it comes to ensuring an economy that works well for the middle class and those working hard to join it. Canadians expect their government to review and monitor the financial sector so that it remains stable and efficient and meets their evolving needs. So again, that provides a bit of context around where the federal government is coming from. The next slide actually speaks a bit to the policy context itself, and some really important words here and some terminology used by the Department of Finance. So if you look at some of the information provided here, basically what the Department of Finance is saying is that following a very turbulent time from a global perspective in 2007 and 2008, what the government is saying is that from an overall perspective, the Canadian industry really fared very well. We had very strong in relation to our peers, and that was a source of pride for the government. And really, at the end of the day, we want to keep it that way. But also the government has said is that following this crisis, even though we fared very well as a country, we actually did a lot more work to actually make our industry more stable. Things like the introduction of Basel III capital and liquidity requirements, increased requirements for things such as FinTrack, AML requirements, those kind of things that we know all too well. So basically what this says is that, again, the government's not resting on its laurels. We want to make our industry and the industry overall even more stable moving forward. So next slide. And in that fashion, the three core policy objectives that they have, and they repeat this throughout all of their literature, are very important for us to fully understand. The first one is around stability. So stability is defined as the sector being safe, sound, and resilient in the face of stress. Policy objective number 2 is efficiency, very important as well. The sector provides competitively priced products and services and passes efficiency gains to customers, accommodates innovation, and effectively contributes to economic growth. The last policy objective is around utility. And utility, according to the Department of Finance, is defined as the sector meets the financial needs of an array of consumers, including businesses, individuals, and families, and the interests of consumers are protected. So as we walk through our strategy and walk through the rest of the presentation, it's a great idea to have these three core policy objectives in the back of our minds. Because everything we do and talk about, and everything, all of our strategies must be grounded in this external expectation from a really key stakeholder, which is the government of Canada. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dean, and he's going to walk through some additional concepts.
Thanks, Sheldon. What we're doing right now is, so you got these 3 core policy objectives. What were they again?
Stability.
Stability.
Efficiency.
Efficiency. And what was the last one? Utility. And so those become a foundation of our strategy. So when we look here at, and we'll talk about getting into concepts of responsible banking, we're also going to talk about disruptive innovation. But a foundation of what we're trying to build on is stability. Okay? And we're looking at efficiency. And we're looking at utility as being kind of those foundation of what we're trying to do from a positioning point of view. And we want to tie it back to those core policy objectives. So if you look at, and we'll apply it as we go through, because you'll hear when we talk about stability and you say, okay, stability of the financial institutions and in industry as a whole, you have to look at it, well, if you're going to have stability in the industry, you have to have stability in the individual institutions that are part of that industry. So you'll often hear us talking about funding assurance, right? So we have to have long-term funding assurance in order to be stable, right? Another thing we talk about is efficiency. And so even in innovation, we talk about efficiency. But if you look at the federal government, it's not just about having efficiency, but how do you take that efficiency and pass it on to your consumers? And so we're going to be talking about how our no-fee account applies, right? And they're saying, well, you need to transfer the efficiencies back. Well, competitive deposit rates and competitive loan rates are how we take efficiency and bring it back to our members. And so we'll be linking those things together as we think about it. It also says if we're efficient, we need to provide innovations. And so we're going to be talking about innovations as part of our whole thing in disruptive innovation. And so when we look at it, and you look at utility, so our MAC, investing in our MAC, brings utility because now we're able to bring financial services to communities that don't have access to financial services like La Loche or Île-de-Croix or Beauval. So those are some of the things that build into our strategy, is aligning our strategy and our principles with that. Now, an important part of this is when we look at responsible banking, right? So the challenge is, and I'm just going to deviate for a second, it's a concept called how do we anchor things to what people already know rather than spending a lot of money trying to educate people about something, right? So I'm just going to take you back and say, in a recent CCUA study of non-members, so it's the Canadian Credit Union Association, and they did a national awareness study of credit unions, or of people about credit unions. Here's what's interesting. 39% of people don't know what a credit union is. Or 39%. 9% have a misunderstanding of credit unions. That is, they have a wrong perception or a misperception of what credit unions are. 18% have an incomplete perception of what a credit union is. Okay? So you're talking about 64% of non-members really have the wrong perception, an incomplete perception, or don't know anything about a credit union as a whole. 14% had a positive perception, and 6% had a negative perception. And so as we're out there marketing, we've got to think about, okay, and then the remaining were a combination of other things, right? But if they don't know, or they have a misunderstanding, or they have an incomplete picture, then we have to decide, in our own minds, how we're going to position a credit union to people who don't really know, and there's a large portion. There's 42% penetration of within Saskatchewan, where 42% of the population has a membership with a credit union. But what's interesting is in Alberta, it's just over 14%, right? The rest are non-members in the Alberta marketplace. In Ontario, it's just over 11% deal with a credit union, so their penetration is very low. Manitoba's higher than Saskatchewan, but if you look at British Columbia, they're probably right in line with Saskatchewan in terms of the perceptions, and it's quite low in Atlantic Canada as well. So we are going to be becoming a federal credit union. We're going to be marketing to that group right across the country. And you know what? There's not a lot of people in Ontario and Alberta, for example, who know anything about a credit union. So we could spend a lot of money trying to educate them about what is a credit union, or we could spend a lot of money trying to educate them about cooperative principles. But what we need to be thinking about is take something that's already in their mind, they have somewhat of a concept of, and then how do we anchor those cooperative principles to something that already exists in mind. In Europe and in Asia, responsible banking is actually a fairly advanced state. Deutsche Bank uses responsible banking. There's numerous Dutch banks that use responsible banking. In the UK, it's growing. There's even schools and degrees. So you can get a master's degree in responsible banking in the UK. And so when you look at it, it's starting to emerge into North America, but it's nowhere near the level it needs to be. But if you look at Asia, a definition that comes out of the Asian groups where governments in Asia and banks in Asia came together to look at the concept of responsible banking, they say there's three key components: corporate governance, corporate sustainability, and corporate social responsibility. I'll get you to move to the next. Okay, so let's look at corporate governance, right? So in our presentation that we'll post later, we'll actually provide this slide so you look at it, but I just want to highlight what's in red. With specific regard to responsible banking, corporate governance must take into account the needs and the impacts of various stakeholders and society as a large, as unbridled maximization of shareholder value can damage an environment, society, and ultimately the bank itself. Right? So if you look at bank fees and you look at what's been involved recently with regard to banks, the banks are pushing harder and harder and harder to produce profits to give to shareholders, and what's causing them to do is to do, in some cases, some of their staff are doing unethical practices. And as a result, it's because of unbridled maximization. We're going to talk about how the credit union principles work within this framework and within this definition. The next one is corporate sustainability. Now, here's what's interesting. Corporate sustainability is the extent to which a firm meets the needs of present stakeholders without compromising its ability to meet the needs of future stakeholders. So in this context of social or corporate sustainability, we have to look at, when we look at our region, right? And this ties back to two things: stability and deposit assurance. That if we were to remain strictly in our region, and that's the decision that Innovation's board and Innovation's executive came to, we cannot sustain the organization long term by remaining in our region. And the premise of that is this: population in some areas of our region are declining. The growth that is occurring is marginal at best. And the other thing is 60% of our deposits are held by our consumer deposits by people over the age of 65. And so the whole concept of intergenerational transfer of funds becomes important, because where did their kids live and who did they bank with? And so when we think about that, we're trying to meet not only the stability objective, but we're trying to meet this sustainability objective. And we believe that going national as an executive team and as a board and as a senior leadership team, that we need to be able to provide not just for this generation, but for generations to come. So when we make our decisions, we're thinking about, today, but we're thinking about our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children. How do we create a sustainable environment for them? The next one is corporate social responsibility. And so it is commonly defined as being the integration of issues of concern held by a wider society of companies, business models, or operations, and their interaction with the stakeholders on a voluntary basis, going beyond only complying with what is legislated or regulated for. So compliance are basically going up and beyond what we're required to do. So even if you think about the concept of us going federal, we're under a new regulatory environment, or we would be under a new regulatory environment under OSFI. But you know what? We believe that we should hold ourselves to a higher account, because it's in the best interest of our members if we operate at the highest standard rather than just at what is acceptable. So we want to move beyond just complying to actually volunteering to go beyond and raise our compliance standards to a higher level. Other benefits can include cost reduction, greater employee engagement, brand differentiation, improved business sustainability. Banks increasingly employ CSR to better engage with their customers as well as to fund SMEs and green businesses. But they've got a conflict within this corporate social responsibility, because the more they engage in this, the less they do for profit maximization, right? So they got this double-edged sword. They're always trying to deal with the member or their customer, but also their stakeholders, and they're not always the same objectives that drive them. Okay, so what we have here is under corporate responsible banking, that we take this corporate governance, corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility, but we believe at the core of that is the cooperative principles, right? So if I look at responsible banking being corporate governance, okay, and if I think about it as being corporate sustainability, or corporate social responsibility, okay? And if I take at the core of it being the cooperative values or the cooperative principles, we believe are at the heart of it. So what are those cooperative principles? So independent and autonomous, okay? Voluntary membership, okay? Democratic control, right? So as we go federal, one of the things about democratic control is all the membership is voluntary. They own the organization, they get to vote on it. So when we look at the vote, it's all about democratic control as part of that corporate governance model, right? But here's a key one here. Member economic participation. Okay? Over here you have education, training, and information, right? So as we're giving out packages, we're educating our membership about the needs and the sustainability of the organization, but we're also educating them on what it's going to take, how do they get engaged in the process, how do they vote for the process. So we're providing information. There's also cooperation between co-ops is one of the principles, right? And so we look at it and see how do we work together over time to be able to deliver the best values to our members. And then the next one is concern for community. Okay, those are the principles that we believe and the board believes are at the center of responsible banking, right? So they fall in. But we're going to talk about this one in half a second. So if we look at those cooperative principles, next slide. And I just went through and described what they were. Move to the next one. Okay, so what makes us different than a bank, right? A bank has customers, right? You know, TD Bank has 25 million customers, right? But they also have shareholders, okay? And if you look at it, the dividend history of TD Bank as an example, every year they keep giving a higher and higher dividend, right? So every quarter they're challenged to produce more profit. And as a result of that, they're looking for ways to hike fees. So they hike fees, they're cutting jobs, they're cutting and closing branches, particularly in rural Canada. And so when you walk through, they're driven by rewarding this group, for the most part, at the expense of this group. And so they have a different model because those customers, some of which may be shareholders, but for the most part, there's a disconnect between customer and shareholder. What I just described on the participation and what makes a credit union different is our member customers are also our member owners. So we have a choice now, and if you think about efficiency, as I talked about in stability, we have a choice as to how we reward our members. We can reward our members with no fee accounts up front, or we can reward our members through competitive deposit rates, through competitive loan rates. We can also reward them through patronage, so the dividends that we pay and the patronage payments that we pay, these are ways that we can reward it. We can also manage the efficiency. So what is this, an acceptable level of efficiency? Well, we still reward our member customers, member owners, but how do we create efficiency levels so that we can choose to sustain the organization long term? So yes, you can't give it away, but we could choose, like the banks, to charge all the fees up front to our members and then give it at the end of the day back to them in a patronage payment. But do we want to do that, or do we want to have some sort of combination where we choose how we want to reward our members? Do we want to reward them up front? Do we want to reward them in the middle? Do we want to reward them at the end? But also, banks drive high efficiency so that they can maximize what they give back to their shareholders. So this gets back to the concept of corporate social responsibility about governance, and you need to have governance for sustainability, because unbridled maximization of profits hurts these people, but it benefits these people. In our case, these people are these people. We manage the efficiency for the right level so that we can then turn around. We choose how we want to reward them. But we're not going to reward in terms of, we're not going to have unbridled maximization, because we'd only hurt our members. So at the end of the day, we're in it for our members, and so we just manage that process. We're not driven by that profitability objective. Let's come here. I talked about it. How do we reward our members? So there are 7 different principles under cooperative principles. The key is this. It's difficult, once again, when I said, to communicate things to members, right? So you try to communicate too many things, they get lost in the communication. And what's happened? Well, if we try to communicate too many things, we wind up creating an environment where they don't know, they have misunderstanding, and they have an incomplete picture of what a credit union is. So you ask yourself the question, is the co-op the end in itself, or is it a means to an end? We believe that the co-op is a means to an end, not an end in itself. And so as a result of that, we pick some of these things. And so what we pick is member economic participation is one of the 7 principles that we really want to drive home. Other credit unions will focus on other things, but this is a way that we can live by. Not only we do all these principles, but this is the one where we want to market. And so we look back and we say, okay, how do members get economic participation from innovation? The first way they get it is a no-fee account. Okay? And that's why we have it. It's kind of like upfront patronage. Doesn't matter how you manage yourselves. If I get the patronage up front, well, hey, you're benefiting me. And that gets back to the government's efficiency. So if we're efficient, we transfer that back to our members. But not only that, it's also no transaction fees. So the ding-free account, you look at ding-free ATMs, you've got our e-transfers, right? Ding-free. Our e-transfers. All of those are benefits that we provide to our members, free online bill payments, etc. It's a way that we give back to our membership, our customer member owner. Another way we do it is competitive rates. Once again, government talks about how do you transfer the efficiencies on. So if we have competitive rates, okay, and those rates are on deposits, and we give them on loans and mortgages. And then the third method we do is the patronage at the end. So we give a combination of ways we reward our members. All of these methods are really member rewards. Okay? And so we like to think of them as member rewards for everyday banking. So we are rewarding you for everything you do. Now here's the interesting part. By the way, when we had credit card, cash back on credit card purchases, and we're going to be changing our credit card provider, we can even get credit cards into this member rewards for everyday banking. And that becomes a platform that we can market. And it's different than all the credit unions because some credit unions may provide no-fee accounts, and they may have some competitive rates, but if we check, the last time we checked, 4 out of 5 term deposit rates, for example, Innovation had the best rates across the country, right? So we beat all the banks, we beat Tangerine, and we beat most of the brokers, right? And so we give competitive rates that benefit our members. So once again, we can choose how we turn efficiency back into benefiting our members. And then we got the patronage. All of this focuses on this. There's no one credit union in the country that does all three. There's no bank that does all three. And so when we think about it, if we're going to create a unique value proposition, that's a unique value proposition. And so we want to tie it together. Now, there's certain words that we've framed up and we've talked about. What does the S stand for?
Save.
Save. What does the E talk? Earn, right? So we save through our no fee account, no transaction fees, no e-transfer fees, etc. We save money. We also save money through competitive deposit rates. And we save money, in fact, we look at it, we save it through competitive loan rates. So we save money, but we earn money through competitive deposit rates. So that's how we earn. We also earn money through patronage. And so those are concepts that apply, in my mind, both to responsible banking, the cooperative principles, right? And where we've chosen to be unique in terms of our value proposition. And if you look at it, the next thing is we give, and we give back to our community. So we frame up some of these different concepts, and we choose to use and market some of the cooperative principles, but we're not trying to market all of them. And we're trying to tie back these cooperative principles in terms that people understand. So member rewards is something that everybody, whether they're a member or a non-member, can get their head around. That's one concept. Responsible banking is something that even millennials, they kind of have a concept of, but they don't have a concept of what is a co-op or what is a credit union. So what we'll tie in our umbrella positioning is responsible banking, and let's tie those cooperative principles back to that. So that's kind of the thinking behind the positioning of what we're trying to do. Now, how are we going to do it? We're going to apply some well-known theory from Harvard University. So if you look at disruptors, Dan talks about them all the time. Technology, what's CD?
Consumer behavior.
Consumer behavior. Behavior. And the last C, competition, right? Now, and that is this, technology for technology's sake, there's a lot of technology that's out there, but it's nowhere near commercialization, right? So you see things, or they're in their infancy, you hear blockchain, you hear Bitcoin, and so on. But really, it's technology that's advancing, artificial intelligence, and so on. But consumer behavior is changing, right? We talk about the smartphone being the branch of the future. But their behavior patterns are changing, digital transactions are changing. 92% of all our transactions now at Innovation Credit Union are electronic. But it's when these three things come together, when technology is out there, competitors are using it, and consumers are using it, then you get disruption. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about now is innovation, but before I jump into that, I'm going to tell you so you have a frame of reference when I talk about disruptive innovation. What does it all mean, right? So just remember this. So disruptive innovation is taking a product and making it simpler and more affordable, so that many more people have access to it. Okay, so taking a product and making it simpler and more affordable so more people have access to it, right? So innovation doesn't always have to be technology. Innovation can be, we simplify something that people use every day. And so we look at that. Now, why would we want to do that? Disruption describes a process where a smaller company with fewer resources is able to successfully challenge established incumbent businesses. And so when we look at that theory coming out of Harvard University by a fellow by the name of Clayton Christensen, right? And so he's done on theories on economic growth. And what he's looking at then is, okay, we're smaller, because everybody asks, you go federal, how are you going to take on the banks? Okay? So I want to dispel one myth right now. We take on the banks right now. If you go national or federal, how are you going to compete with fintechs? We compete with fintechs right now. And what's interesting is, over the last few years, our members are growing even though our marketplace has marginal growth and in some locations has negative growth, yet we're growing our membership. Our net membership is increasing. It started increasing substantively in 2014. Why? No fee account. What is the no fee account? It's taking a product, making it simpler and more affordable so that many more people have access to it, right? So with this product, what we're doing in disruptive innovation is we're now saying, hey, it's working in this region, and by the way, we're competing against all the banks, we're competing against Tangerine, we're competing against PC Financial. So if we're succeeding, why would we stop offering it only in our own jurisdiction? Why wouldn't we take this to Alberta, which only has 14%, 14 point some percent of people in the province who deal with a credit union? Why wouldn't we take it to Ontario, where only 11% of the population is dealing with a credit union? Why wouldn't we take it there and offer the same thing that's disruptive? Okay? So now, on the innovation side, though, there's empowering innovations, sustaining innovations, and efficiency innovations, and I'll just share with you. Okay, an empowering innovation is to transform complex products into cheaper, simple ones available to more people. Efficiency innovations are to reduce the cost of making and distributing existing products and services. And the last one is sustaining innovations, is where you replace yesterday's products with new ones to create new markets or entirely new products. And so when we look at that, those are the definitions of innovation, right? So when we look at the banks, here's typically what happens. There's an empowering innovation that occurs, and then what they do is they move to sustaining innovations. And so what they're doing is, once I get that empowering innovation through technology, I'm going to sustaining innovations, and then what I do is I look at efficient innovations. And then what happens is this. They keep adding more efficient innovations, right? And then what they do is one or two things. They pay to their shareholders. So if I keep driving down the costs, I can then produce more profit. And what I do then is produce more profit. I pay larger dividends, as you saw going back. So I keep jacking up fees. I keep charging more. I drive down costs. I lay people off. Have you seen how many times people have been laid off in the banks? If you look at any of the news stories across Canada, they drive down and close down branches more and more and more because then they lay off people, so they go. So those efficiency innovations either go to shareholders, and you know what? They do invest in sustaining technologies, right? So they're investing in things. They're playing around. They're going to spend $1.4 billion this year. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's TD Bank is going to spend $1.4 billion just on innovations, product innovations, and so on. So they're playing around with the technologies. But if you look at innovation, we have an empowering innovation, we have a sustaining innovation, and we have efficiency innovations, right? Because we're investing back in, and we're working on improving efficiencies. However, the difference is, in the case of the banks, they're not transferring it back to what? Simplifying products and making them affordable so more people have access to them. They're not doing that. In fact, they're charging more. They're going here and they're recycling here. In the case of innovation, we're actually getting back to empowering innovations. How do we empower? Well, we have no fee accounts, no transaction fees. We're always trying to find ways to drive down costs and bring more value to our members. We're trying to give the best rates we can have, and whatever's left, we're paying back in patronage, which means that as we get efficiencies, we're putting them back into empowering innovations, right? So we'll look at more innovative kind of product concepts that benefit members in the future. But we're also investing through innovation in sustaining innovations. So our member rewards app, you look at Lock and Block, right? You can block your own debit card transactions. Innovation is one of the pioneers of that, in building that product. So we're constantly thinking about ways that we can give sustaining innovations for that right purpose. Now, to put this all in context is this. If you looked at the steel industry, you had the integrated steel firms. They're fully integrated steel firms. Okay, integrated. Okay, steel firms, right? And so you think about it, it's almost like a fully integrated bank, right? So rebar, there's about 7% margin that's in rebar. There's about, in angle iron, there's about 14% margin in that. Structural steel, that's like I-beams and so on. There's about 18% in there. And in structural steel or sheet steel and custom steel, it's about 25% to 30% margin in that. So along comes mini mills. Okay? And a mini mill can operate at 20% less than an integrated steel firm. So when you look at it, the first thing that the mini mills did is because they can produce rebar 20% cheaper, they then said, hey, you know what? We're gonna charge less money. And so they attacked the rebar market. Now what's interesting is this, as they attacked the rebar market, they could do it a lot cheaper, and it was, poor quality steel. So the integrated steel company said, you know what? Let's exit this part, and let's move into angle iron, structural steel, and sheet steel. Let's just keep moving up. So they kind of cut it off here, and they moved up into these categories, and you know what? Their profitability increased because they got rid of this low margin business. But once the mini mills attacked this, the minute the last integrated steel firm came out, the product or the market price dropped 20%. But these guys could do it. But they said, you know what? Now we do this. Why don't we just move up into the angle iron business? And so what they did is they started going under because they could do it cheaper. They kind of took away the market share. And the structural steel company said, you know what? That's a low margin business. It's only 14%. Let's move up. And so they moved up, and then they've been strictly in the structural steel and the sheet steel industry. And the mini mills took over this market. Then you move up another one, right? And then he said, hey, we're here. Why don't we go after structural steel? And the integrated steel company said, you know what? Structural steel, there's really not good margins in it. Let's just focus on all the custom steel business. And so they did there. And what eventually happened is about mid-1990s, the last integrated steel company went out of business, right? And the mini mills took over. So when you look at it, it's called disruptive innovation. This is the concept where you go after the market that others are just plainly ignoring and not dealing with. And what happens is it's not a huge competitive reaction to it. It's because they look at it and say, you know what, it's just low margin business, I don't make any money at it. And when you look at the financial services industry, there's core banking, right? And that's about your basic bank account, your operating account. And if you look at it, you look at the banks, right? So you got core banking. Then you got intermediation, right? That's how we make money off of deposits. So there's deposits and loans. And by the way, we make 76% of our revenue came from this intermediation, right? And so when you look at it, you go, okay, then you got wealth. And then you got at the top asset management business. Okay, so when we look at it, disruptive innovation is this. We're saying, hey, you know what? We don't have to be driven, right, by all the profits and maximization going back. What we can do is we can manage our efficiencies, therefore we can afford to deliver these innovations to our membership and non-members in the future and expansion. So we go after this core banking business, and I've heard even people within the credit union system say, oh, you know what, we'll let somebody else do the transaction processing. You know why? Because we don't make any money in it, right? And so the banks are saying, hey, you know what, those no-fee accounts, unless you have 3 or 4 accounts with us, you know what, we're not going to give you any free banking. So what happens is they look at it and they've, in fact, let themselves move to the next level because this is where we're going to make money. We're not going to make money on this. But this provides the opportunity. Then they start moving more and more to wealth. Why? Because we make more money out of the wealth management business. We're only making margins of about 165, right? So we have higher margins in the intermediation, but their intermediation margins are around 165 basis points. And so then, you know, how well or how rigorously are they going to defend this? Right? So if we keep moving up and we keep challenging, that they're going to keep pushing themselves out. Now, you're not going to see the same disruptive innovation and eventually pushing out of the industries for the banks, right? Because they're huge, right? And to a large extent, they're doing a lot of things. But there's opportunity for us to double our membership. And as we go federal, right, we're trying to create stability, we're using our efficiencies wisely, we're trying to create utility, but we want to bring through disruptive innovation our member rewards value proposition, which is disruptive, and we want to bring it into the core banking and payments business across the country. We want to bring it into the intermediation business across the country, and eventually the wealth management business, right? So we see that as carving out our section of the Canadian marketplace. And so this is kind of the framework of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, the last part of this is the concept called GAFA, right? So this is what we're doing, but and it's not that we're going to do everything, but we want to be thinking all the times about innovation and how we can be disruptive. And we look at it in the context of Google, right? We're not going to become the next Google, but what can we learn from Google and what they did well? What about Apple? And what has Apple done well? We're not going to be the next Apple, but we want to figure out the things that they've done well and how can we apply it to ourselves. Facebook, okay, and Amazon. And when we look at these under this GAFA principle, right, we want to say, okay, what does Google do extremely well? Analytics. So if we looked at our business, are we applying analytics properly? Are we learning from them to say they can basically respond specific to your needs with high quality search results, right? So what are we doing from an analytics point of view that we could get to know our members better and we can better understand them? So we use the term now, eventually we want to get to a mass market of one, right? So we know each person well enough that we can give them tailored offerings based on their behaviors and their needs. So we want to do that. When we look at Apple, it's all about ease of use. Okay? And so the question is, how easy is it to set up an account with the Innovation Credit Union, right? And so we're working on Open Anywhere to try to simplify it so we can get account opening done to 3 to 5 minutes in a fully automated fashion, right? But if we start looking at how easy is it to do things at Innovation Credit Union, how well do we empower our members? And the example is, you get your iPhone, which is way more complicated in some fashions than the things we do, but you get your iPhone now without an operator's manual. Yet people can be up and running in 15 minutes, right? So you can take something complex and make it so easy that they can be up and running in 15 minutes. And by the way, that's grandma that's getting up and running in 15 minutes, right? So we need to be thinking all the time about ease of use. Are our business processes user-friendly? And we want to adapt that. Facebook, right? This is just about the whole concept of social and connectedness, right? Connected, right? So in this world that's changing in terms of how communities are defined, are we adapting? Or are we still sticking on to old concepts and trying to build our business around old concepts? So from a marketing point of view, we want to move from traditional marketing, right? So before our spend was 80-20, traditional. We want to change that so it's 80-20, where it's digital and we're communicating in a way that relates to people. The new coffee shop is Facebook, right? It's just different in terms of how we do that. And Amazon is all about logistics, okay? And this gets down to concepts of things like, I can order a $20 item on Amazon and I know at any point in time where my order is. I know if it's being shipped or if it's been picked. I know all aspects of that right up until the time of delivery to my door. The question becomes, if we looked at loan processing, right? And somebody says, hey, I haven't heard anything back. Then the question becomes, if they can do it for an $18 item, why couldn't we follow the loan process as a consumer, follow it all along its process so that I would know where my loan is at any given point in time? And that might be a $500,000 mortgage. So on a $500,000 mortgage, it's like a black box, but yet for an $18, $19 item out of Amazon, I know where it is at any point in time, right? So it's not to say that we're gonna do all these things, but they have to guide our decision making and our innovations, right? So where are we making sustaining innovations? Where are we making efficiency innovations relative to some of these concepts? And where are we investing back in? So that gives you kind of an overview of the things that we're doing and the things that we're working on. But what we tried to do today is just give you a presentation of how all this fits together from a positioning point of view. So we're taking everything that we're currently doing and working on and just trying to frame it up so that it's easier to communicate and understand. Thank you.